What's up, troopers? We're here for another TFT mini unit guide. This time we are going to be talking about the A-A5 speeder truck, aka the bus, as it's often called. This is a unit that is usable both in Rebels as a straight-up Rebel unit, or it's also usable in Shadow Collective as a Raider mercenary. Mike, what's the word association when we talk about bus? What's the word that you think of?
Annoying.
Agree. Mike, why are these annoying?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the foremost use for the bus is that it is a very large brick that blocks line of sight.
My word was going to be large.
Yeah. And it just kind of, when used effectively, it can really screen a lot of your army from taking damage. I think that in the recent game, and perhaps as the dice pools have continued to like get higher,
Yeah.
it has become a little bit less good at that, just because it is prone to kind of dying a little easier. So you have to be a little bit more cautious with when you're doing that. But when you are able to do it effectively, it can swing a game on its own.
Yeah, it definitely can. So the key things about the bus is that it is, of course, a transport, which means that after it completes its deployment, you're going to be able to deploy any units within, and then it is able to take a second action. The tactic that is often used that sort of makes transporting extra effective when it's being done through an A-A5 is that you can do that drop off, you can deploy that unit out forward a little bit, and then what the bus does is that it takes another move in terms of being able to block for that unit that was just deployed. And then because these things have reposition, which is I'll say that is one distinct advantage it has over the upcoming release as we record this of the Wheelo tank, is that with reposition, it means that not only can it do the free pivot at the beginning of any move the same way that any non-speeder vehicle can, but it can get to where it needs to get and then rotate itself on its axis, which when it's a very large, long base like this means that you can change the end position of the A-A5 around considerably. On that same topic, even though it says speed 1, it is speed 1 plus the rather large length of its base, which means that these things are actually quite fast, Michael.
It's one of the fastest units in the game.
Yeah.
Frankly, just because of how big the base is.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to point out about transport that is, I think, often people see it as kind of like an incidental, but I actually think is more important than the rest of the transport keyword, is the fact that it hands out an order token on turn 1.
Super important.
To whatever it's transporting, right? So,
which you want almost all the time. You don't want it if you're bringing Black Suns around.
Yeah, that's a little bit less good in Shadow Collective, but in Rebels, it is like
Rebels,
so.
They're like, oh my god, and I get an order, really?
Yeah,
for me,
it's really really good.
Yeah.
So, keep that in mind that anything with a transport keyword, in this case the A-A5, like allows you to do that, and that's like a large portion of the base cost in my mind by itself is like, free orders on turn 1, let's go. There's very few ways specifically in Rebels to like actually get that done.
Yeah, so if you're talking about something like a sleeper cell where you really want to like wait until the last minute to get those guys out there to try to have their pick in terms of things that they may want to shoot at, given the fact that if you use that sort of like move, deploy, move thing, then you can get them out pretty far while keeping them pretty darn safe with the body of the bus. Having that face-up order token ends up being really, really important. On that topic, I actually want to shift to talking about upgrades. And so since we were just talking about order control, I want to actually start by talking about the comms upgrade slot, where there are various options that you could potentially use here, Mike, but I think that the main one that's worth bringing up is HQ uplink, which is, and this is often something that, or both a Rebel list and a Shadow Collective list can potentially benefit from HQ uplink, because even in Shadow Collective, these don't get any sort of benefit from independent. So it's like one of the few things that you don't mind having face-ups on. Whereas there are various upgrades or there are various command cards that Shadow Collective has access to that actively don't want you to put order tokens out there if you can avoid it. And so having that HQ uplink can actually also mean that on certain turns you're getting an extra dodge or an extra aim, depending on what command you're using. And like it's most important for round one. But there are other situations where it can be helpful. I'll say that, funny enough, they may be the best combo with HQ uplink just because this is a way to get extra utility out of the recover command if you're going to use it, is Wedge Antilles. You don't usually need to be doing extra pivots, but it would allow you to do some crazy stuff like do a complete 180 before you move your vehicle, which can allow you to actually get to places that you need it to go. And then, of course, he fills the field commander requirements that if you're running a fairly unique rebel list that doesn't have any access to quote unquote normal commanders in it, it can allow you to do that. Are there any other comms upgrades that you think are worth getting into, Mike?
Yeah, I think both Comms Jammer and Hacked Comms Unit are things that we should call out.
Sure.
The bus is generally range 1 of enemy units a lot, just because of it gets on POIs and blocks units' movement, and it's often the bus is so big that sometimes it can contest multiple POIs at the same time pretty easily. So it ends up in weird positions, and Comms Jammer can make your opponent's life miserable. Hacked Comms Unit can really make it so that your bus maybe lives to activate an extra time because you got a free order on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hacked Comms Unit is kind of like a budget HQ uplink for turns that aren't turn 1. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I agree. So next we'll shift back to talking about the pilots. So in Rebels, they have access to the access to the unique pilots, which is, say, Ryder Azadi. That could be fun to get. Like, I guess that would be another way you could get HQ uplink utility, like recover utility, is that you could be doing speed 2 moves with this thing. So that's like something you could do. But then Shriv and Wedge, they are field commanders, and they both have utility as well. The Rebels, the Rebels also have access to the Outer Rim Speed Jockey that gives it cover 1. For 10 points, I feel like that's kind of a lot.
It doesn't do the same thing that it does on the Airspeeder.
Right.
On the Airspeeder, you're like, I've got cover 2. This is great.
That changes a lot. Adding cover 1 doesn't really change that much.
Yeah, this is not worth 10 points.
And then the Hotshot pilot, I also am not a huge fan of. Like, we're going to get to the guns in a second, but I generally, I don't think of these too much as being weapons platforms, just because they we'll get to why, and so like adding sharpshooter on top of that is really worth 8 points. I don't know.
It's also just not. Sharpshooter 1 versus like Sharpshooter 2 is like a very big deal.
Yes,
it's like Sharpshooter 1 is like I could care less about a lot of the time, and whereas like Sharpshooter 2 is like, I don't know.
It's Sharpshooter 2 is like, that turns off low profile, and like then you're getting into the zone of actually being a lot more interesting. So on the Shadow Collective side, they have totally different choices for pilots. They have the Frenzied Gunner, which is pretty solid if you don't need a field commander or command vehicle, then the Frenzied Gunner is pretty solid for 5 points to just like give you extra dice on your attack roll, assuming you are bringing a weapon. But then I think that then there is the new gang boss, which comes with the Wheelo tank. I don't really see a ton of utility for using the gang boss when you could instead be using the raiding party leader, because
I guess this is only in Shadow Collective.
Yeah, if we're talking about Shadow Collective specifically, then the raiding party leader gives you Like that does give you a field commander, but then it also makes it so that all of your raider units get demoralized 1, which is a pretty nice bonus. So that's something that is often used as sort of the way to get extra utility out of your swoops as well. So that way you can have 5 vehicles that each have demoralized 1, which is not bad at all. Some would say that a couple years ago that was the basis of the world's winning list. That was in a prior version of Legion, but it is still a tactic that can be pretty effective. Is there something I'm missing with the gang boss, by the way? I'm just like looking at it, and I'm wondering sort of what the advantage would be over, like, especially because they're both unique. It would allow you to have like 2 different command vehicles, I guess. But
I'm looking at this very specific text.
Yeah,
because
it only shares, like, it would only share courage with weak way functionally. As we record this, like, I'll admit that this is shortchanged a tiny bit by the fact that we don't fully know what the weak way soldiers do or what they cost, and so we can't talk about that potential context with the gang boss. So there may be something in that, but for a Shadow Collective list, I think that if you're going to be using any, if you have swoops in the list, you should probably have raiding party leader in your list, is the way that I would say it.
I think the functional difference is that if you have command vehicle X, you can't actually issue orders via command card.
Right, and so that seems like a strict downgrade.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be the only difference that I can see.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's talk about the guns. As we record this, the quad laser and I think maybe the heavy laser too by a little bit got cheaper. I think this was done to incentivize putting guns on these rather than running them without guns at all, which is still going to be kind of common at least. But it's interesting when you, like, this is like a good lesson in the math of Legion is the idea that an attack that only has 3 dice is not that much less expensive than an attack that has 6 dice. And yet, like, the 2 main differences between these pools are that the heavy laser is up to range 4 and it has critical 1, whereas the quad laser is range 1 to 3. It does have impact 2, which sometimes matters, but it has no surge conversion access. And I'll say that, like, the heavy laser in particular with the frenzied gunner makes it pretty likely that you're going to be getting utility out of that critical 1. It's getting into the likeliest zone that you're going to see a surge token among those results, whereas adding the dice to the quad laser is just like adding another dice to something that is not converting surges. I'm not sure, like, now that they cost close to each other, like, which one of these is your main preference, Mike?
I think you take the quad laser at the new prices, like, every time, honestly. You're generally not range 4 of what you're shooting at because you're pretty. Yeah,
you're
pretty
getting into the
close.
business when you have a bus.
You know, and yeah. I think just generically having impact 2 is just, like, way more valuable than having critical 1. If we're assuming, like, all things even, these are essentially kind of the same price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think prices are interesting, but I'm definitely on a.
If it's only 3 points, I think you're probably right that it's better to just have the extra dice and the impact 2. I think that's reasonable. Crew slats, it has 2 of them. And then the access to crew slots is the same in both Rebels and in Shadow Collective. The one that I think is used the least often, especially now that it is 16 points, is the unstable astromech. I think there was a time when being able to do double shooting or double moving whenever you needed to was useful, but at 16 points, I think that you would want to be doing it with better guns, which is to say the X-34 lane speeder, if you're going to be using this upgrade. So we're probably mainly talking about the other 3. The 2 that are pretty usable in either army are the unorthodox tactician and the door gunners. Mike, What would you say about an orthodox tactician in terms of like whether it's like what a list should think of, or what somebody should think about when they're building a list of, is it worth making this 16 points more expensive? Because it's like free tokens.
It is free tokens. You should think of this as kind of like this unit has like free action spot or two. Is generally what you're gonna get here, which is definitely okay.
At range 3, really, which is not nothing.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times it like gives a name to itself, and then like, you know, gives a name to like Operative Luke or something. You know, there's not a ton of things in Rebels, I feel like, that's like, oh, I really, really, really want an aim token. Aim tokens are generically good. 16 points is a lot, specifically for a like timing based effect. Like, because of the timing on this card, you really have to make sure that you
activate early. You gotta go.
You activate early with this, which is a significant limitation. It used to not be that way.
Yeah.
And so what that means is you kind of have to have a plan for order control on either this unit, or you need to have a plan to activate the units that you want aim tokens on late.
Right.
Like one of those two things has to be true. Otherwise, this is probably not worth it. And sometimes you just roll nothing. You know, like it is like a little bit of a fickle mechanic in that, you know, sometimes you just take 3 wounds on clones, and you know, sometimes you don't get your aim tokens. So, you know, I think overall, if you're building like a support bus that's like sitting back and shooting, this is a pretty good upgrade. But I think these days I would kind of steer away from this, in that most buses are like, get in there and block
and die.
Then they die.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yep. I agree with that. And then along those lines, we have the door gunners. This is the newest of these upgrades. Now, this is one of the units where, like, for all of the units that door gunners can go on, there's a couple that potentially would have access to surge tokens, which definitely makes the door gunners better, or that they have access to surge conversion. So like that would be the Gav, and then sometimes the Lat, the Republic Lat, I should say. Whereas here, like, this is going to be a 2 black 2 white attack that you're very often going to be able to make. You're probably going to be getting a suppression out of that if you're shooting at troopers. You might get a wound. That's probably the most that you're going to expect. And so I guess the question, Mike, is like, is that worth 12 points most of the time to you?
I think that I'm only looking at the without being able to surge. I don't love this. However, I think if you've got Frenzied Gunner, this can get pretty decent.
Yeah, because that triggers on any attack.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you know, this starts turning into a, you know, once you add another die to this pool, the chances that you blank out become significantly less.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think if you're going the Frenzied Gunner route, I like door gunners a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're adding a die to this, then you're like getting into the zone of like a core plus a heavy amount of dice, and you're gonna get some results, and you know you're like it'll add up importantly over the course of the game is the main reason, because like those two will synergize with each other, and you're adding a total of like 3 or 4 attack dice over the course of the game, which is pretty meaningful.
Yeah, potentially even more than that, to be honest. Like, and you know, I think it takes it from the, like, if you've got the main gun plus the side gunners, that's like 10 dice. There's a pretty big, I think, gap in like units that shoot 8 to 10 dice and units that shoot more than 10.
Yeah.
Frenzied Gunner kind of just raises the ceiling on that by a significant margin.
Agree with that. The last one is the Backworld Medic. And so I'm curious what you think about this, Meg. I see the Backworld Medic as an upgrade that is almost specifically for lists that have Mandalorians in them. So that can be a Rebel list. It's more likely to be a Shadow Collective list in the grand scheme of things. And there's two differences between this and regular medics, which is to say that regular medics, they use the treat keyword. It's a free action, but that they're also limited to usually 2 uses of it per game, whereas the Backworld Medic can sit around doing it all game if it wants to, and potentially do it all 5 rounds of a given game. The reason why I think of it as a Mandalorian specific upgrade is because in most, like for most of your other multi-mini units in Rebels and Shadow Collective, I don't generally think that 1 mini is worth like a 12-point upgrade that costs an entire action for a unit that is often going to want to be doing move shoot, especially when their guns are relatively cheap. But I'm not sure how you feel about like that as far as Backworld Medic being a utility piece.
No, I generally agree, specifically in that like the game's shorter now. You can only do this 5 times as opposed to 6.
Yeah.
I think if Rebels or Shadow Collective ever gets a General Veers, I would feel very differently about that.
Access to guidance is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It would be very different.
Vehicle.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, like being able to do this like twice a turn would be. I would feel interested, but I think with it as it stands, it's like, yeah, I bring back a Mando or whatever, which is good, but again, timing sensitive. It also fights deliberately with the timing for Unorthodox Tactician.
Yes,
you don't
because you want to use this late in the round.
You want Medic late, but you want Tactician early.
Right.
So it's like, oh man. So you kind of like can't have everything, and Tactician is just a lot better than Medic. So you kind of have to decide that you want a Medic-y bus as opposed to a I'm going to hand out aim tokens bus, which
that there are other situations such as like a Rebel list with Op Luke, potentially would want to be able to take some wins off of Op Luke if he does end up taking them. But again, I think most Rebel lists, unless you're spamming Mandos, would probably rather have Tactician, and because those two things are kind of at war with each other, you probably don't want to be running a bus that has both a Tactician and a Backworld Medic. I think that the main place I see Backworld Medic is in like a quad Mando list in Shadow Collective, because there it's like pretty darn likely that you're going to have some decent targets to Medic back, and that is a situation where running HQ uplink on your buses and like either sort of just like move recover or Medic recover, or maybe like Medic shoot, and sort of doing what you need to do. Like if you do that double move round 1 and kind of get to where you really want to be, and then you spend the rest of the time doing like Medic shoot, like that's actually like pretty decent. And in that list, because Mandos are basically like half of your list at that point, keeping those units healthy and effective is super duper important. And so that's probably like the main place where I would see this being used. But all in all, Mike, the speeder truck / the bus is pretty versatile. Of course, like the main important thing that it is that it's fast and big and pretty hard to kill. And in this version of Legion that we're playing, being all of those things and also like usually being not that expensive. I think most builds that I like for the speeder truck will come in at less than 100 points. Then it's overall just like very useful, and it presents a problem that your opponent typically needs to devote more squad points than the bus is worth to actually get rid of it. because of the fact that it has armor 5 and that
Yeah.
its weak point rear, it can be gotten to, but it's like you can make it so that it's not super easy to get to that, especially because the front and rear arcs are smaller on an oblong vehicle like this. So yeah, like very, very useful vehicle. It'll be interesting to see in the coming months to what degree the A-A5 and the Wheelo tank are going to be sort of sharing space with each other.
Like fighting with each
Yeah.
other. Yeah.
It's
I
much more interesting than an Empire where the Wheelo tank just replaces the Gav entirely. Yeah.
I suspect if you want like a shooty like back, like in the back platform, you probably take the Wheelo.
Wheelo has range, like relies on a range 2 gun to get its full shot out though, for what it's worth.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know. It feels like it's probably less good at the like pulling up and blocking than the. I don't know. It does have a couple more health though, so maybe that's enough to like.
It doesn't have
swing
reposition though, which I think will actually end up making a big difference, especially for newer players who realize like how much of a pain in the butt these things can be when you don't get to move both before and after you put the template down. But yeah, overall, really great vehicle. Definitely one that I would recommend checking out if you play either of the armies that we were just talking about. And if you like what we're doing here, please do consider checking out our Patreon. We will see you on the next TFT Mini.